This is the podcast that we ask our guests from in front and behind the camera, how did they get their foot in the door? What was the key to unlocking their success? What's their story?
Our guest today is actor, writer, director, Billy Bryk.
My dad's an actor. My mom is. I mean, she's acted before in the past, but I don't think she would refer to herself as an actor. She does like design and contracting stuff. But she, yeah. I mean, I loved acting. I loved movies since I was a little kid. I knew I wanted to make movies, and I think when I was like 3 years old, I just was like, I want to make movies, and then I just saw the people in the movie and just assumed like that's what making movies is acting, because I didn't really think about all the stuff that sort of happened to make behind the camera. So yeah, I always knew that I wanted to make movies, and then I thought I wanted to be an actor as a kid. And my dad, being an actor, was like, there's no way that you're going to be an actor. Like, if you want to talk to me at 18, 19 about maybe acting, like, sure, but I don't really want you to be a child actor because it's a very tough business, and two, I'm not driving you to audition. He's like, I'll drive you to soccer practice. I'm not gonna go around like on set with you. So I kind of like put acting away in my mind a little bit and really focused on filmmaking. And I went to an arts high school and focused on film there, and I went to film school for a little bit as well. And I thought that I just would be directing. And then I wasn't having a great time in film school. I really wanted to be writing and directing. That was my dream. And the sort of like curriculum was not geared towards that. It was, bizarrely enough, like it was a lot more about like other jobs in the film industry, and they kind of wanted people to not be writing or directing. Like, I had a professor who was like, nobody in this room will ever write and direct a feature film, so you can like give up on that now. And I just was like, we're a bunch of like really young people who are all passionate and want to make movies. Like, I don't want to be in this room if that's what you're going to be teaching us. Like, I'd rather, take my tuition elsewhere. So I really was conflicted because I knew what I wanted to do, and it felt like at least part of that program that I was in, or my experience, like, wasn't going to lead me to that. So I thought a lot about acting again, and I'd always loved acting, and I thought, if I could act, and if I could be on set, and I could learn the craft of filmmaking through the eyes of an actor and just like hanging out and soaking up as much as possible, that would be amazing. So I started acting, and then pretty soon after that, like, one of my first things that I booked was Ghostbusters, and then I met Finn, and that's sort of where we met, and then the movie was born out of that. So it happened a lot quicker than I was anticipating. I thought, I would be really focused on writing and trying to develop my voice as a filmmaker, but maybe I didn't anticipate that the opportunity would come as quickly as it did. But I was like ecstatic when we did get that opportunity.
There's such different things as well. I mean, acting is completely different to, writing in a dark room on your own. Directing, you're in front of loads of people. It's, you've got to be very confident and know where you want to get. They're all so different. Is there one that you prefer more than the other, or doing this movie, Hell of a Summer, is that kind of like the ideal? You get to have a bit of everything.
That's a great question. I think that writing is the hardest because it's so isolating. And I think what was helpful about Hell of a Summer is, as I was saying, like, it wasn't as isolating in that experience, just because there was somebody else for me to be writing with, and it was a great way to write like a first feature. But writing is like really, really hard, yeah, because you're just constantly you're alone in a dark room, and everything that you're doing, you're so critical of, and I think you kind of have to be in order for you to write anything that's half decent. But that's tough, and that can be very isolating. And then acting can be so fun because if you're doing the right, it depends on the project, but if you're doing the right project in the right role, like, it can just be a blast, and it's like such a great experience. And then directing, I loved so much, but I don't know, I only directed a movie that I wrote myself, and all my shorts and everything else I've directed has been stuff that I've written, so I've been very passionate about it. I don't know how I'd feel about directing if I was like just coming in as a director for hire, maybe directing something I wasn't nuts about creatively, and hopefully I don't have to do that. And I'd be very passionate about all the projects that I'm directing, but it's tough. Like, I don't know. I definitely enjoyed being able to write and then act and direct at the same time, but it also, I felt like, I could do one where I just write it and direct it and don't act in it. That would be cool. I could maybe write something and act in it and not direct it, or maybe I'd want to do all three. I think it really just depends on the project.
Of course, you've done a full Stallone. You've done a Rocky Balboa.
Yeah.
You wrote the script. You're in it. It's like all encompassing. It must be a lot when you're, when the green light goes and you've got to do that. I mean, how long was the shoot for this?
We were a very quick shoot. We shot in 19 days, which was like basically 19 nights. And I always say this, like in the summer, the nights are so short. So we we only had, I don't know how long the nights really were, like 8 hours, maybe like 8-9 hours of like nighttime to be shooting a lot of these sequences. So we tried to like fake as much as possible, interiors day for night, and extend our days as much as we could. But it was super, super quick. Yeah, we were filming like a huge amount every single day. Crazy experience, yeah.
Were there any, I mean, seeing what the kind of movie is, I'm sure that there's obvious influences, but are there any movies that kind of influenced you that were less sort of obvious? Not necessarily horror films, not necessarily comedies, but movies maybe from your childhood that you were like, oh, that's quite a cool, way of shooting something, or the influences.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good question too, because obviously there are the horror film, like the John Carpenter films were like very influential just in the way that like the camera moves and the sort of atmosphere and the way things felt, or going back at like 80s slasher films, trying to capture that like sort of raw authenticity that like there's a real charm to those movies being like dark and kind of grainy and like a little bit edgy feeling, that we wanted to like keep some of that while still feeling like a contemporary film. But for me, the films that I'd say were like most influential on me as a writer and as a filmmaker are like the early Wes Anderson movies, like Bottle Rocket and Rushmore. Those are, and Tenenbaums as well, but more so Rushmore and Bottle Rocket are like some of probably my favorite films. And just the way that those characters are written and the way that those jokes are written, but then also just like the costuming and the way that the cameras move. There's a lot of little like homages to Rushmore in the movie that I think people might not pick up on. And some of them were cut out, like some of them are a little more obvious than others. But those are the movies that I think inspired me most, because I love those characters so much, and they're so brilliantly written. These like really flawed, funny characters, and we wanted to do that. We wanted to like bring together an ensemble of characters that really are unique and funny and flawed, and then bring the horror element into it, and then have that just heighten everything, like heighten the comedy. We never wanted it to feel like it's a comedy movie that then becomes a horror movie and then the comedy goes away. We were like, once it becomes a horror film, we want that to make everything funnier. We want the situation to make all the jokes land more. Like we wanted, when the stakes get raised, we wanted it to raise in a way that like elevated the comedy and not just like, and now it's a serious movie. This Is the End was like another big, that's very much so like a comedy, but that's one where I kind of feel like you meet these characters, and then as the like apocalypse progresses, they don't change all that much. Like it just kind of heightens what's bad about each of them until the end, when they sort of do like make these little changes. And we wanted that to be the same with our movie, where it's not like, where you kind of at the beginning you get a sense of everybody's like biggest insecurity and their like weirdest like kind of, I don't know, all their like weird insecurities and like petty behavior, and then we wanted all that to just get heightened and become more and more apparent as the movie went on.
There were loads of lovely little moments where you used the horror element. The audience are going in there knowing that there's going to be like horror in there, but you used the horror in a way that was then suddenly funny. So you kind of think, oh, this is a bit of a trope. This is what would happen in the horror film, and then it's a joke, and you're like, oh, okay. And I love that. It was a really nice mix because you're kind of not knowing if you're going to laugh or you're going to be scared. There's that kind of that fine line. And as you say, all the characters are very. You set out all their flaws and they're all the classic horror. You know, you've got this person. They all got their certain things going on, but you kind of played against it as well. So yeah, I found it really interesting. And I genuinely watching it, I was like, this is really well written. This is a really clever film. It's a really clever script. Because you know, they can be in this genre of horror and comedy. So there can be films that are just lazy, but this was really sharp. And there were moments where I was like, yeah, fair play. You found a joke that I was not expecting to be there, and yeah, I'm just gushing about it.
Oh no, thank you. Please gush on. That's all good. Yeah.
But I'd love to ask as well that, like, we have a lot of people that listen to this podcast that want to be filmmakers. They want to get their foot in the door. They want to get their scripts off the ground. And I know obviously both of you being actors, that's going to help because you're already in the industry and you may have connections that you can use. But what was the process to get this script from, you know, the written page onto the screen? How did you go about getting it greenlit?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there was a. We skipped a lot of the sort of steps that I think a lot of people listening will have to go through specifically because Finn is such a successful actor and had so many great relationships with producers and people that really respected him and knew him as a creator, not necessarily as a filmmaker, but they knew that he was a really talented actor and had like a unique voice. So that was like very instrumental. I don't think that I can like downplay that at all, of the fact that like we wrote this script that we were really proud of. We didn't want to go out with a movie that, with all of Finn's, like, again, not trying to speak for him, but like because there's all these opportunities that are unique to him, I think it was really important to him and to us that like the movie was worthwhile, and it wasn't like he was just gonna try to make a movie for the sake of making a movie. It's like, if we're gonna do this, like we really want to do this the right way. But what I would say, and just through sort of more my own experience and also experiences of other friends I have that are breaking into the film industry, it's like a great script, in my opinion, is the most important thing. And I think that if you get a great script in the right hands, people will really respond to it. But just like repetition and just like keeping on making stuff and constantly trying to push yourself as a filmmaker and make films that even like nobody has to see them. Like you can just make a movie, and if it's not very good, delete it, you know, like don't show people. And that's kind of a lot of the stuff that I had done, was like, I didn't really release any of the films that I had made prior to Hell of a Summer, any of my short films and stuff. I just was like trying to make them to develop my own voice and you know, learn about working with people on sets and different crews. But I think that it's like, I don't know. It's tough to say because it's such a unique situation, but I really think you got to just write a movie that you care like a lot about, and that you feel like kind of only you could have written, or it really feels unique to your voice, even if it's in a genre or a subgenre that's been done a lot. Just being like, how can you carve out your own perspective on this story? And then yeah, like send it to people if you can, stick to it, try to meet people, and you can meet a lot of other young filmmakers like online or at various film festivals. So I don't know if that answers your question at all, but
no, definitely. I mean, that's the hard thing is, because I write as well, and it's the point that you made there of, you know, you can make things, you don't have to show anything, you don't have to release it. That's a great bit of advice, because I feel like a lot of people think, as you mentioned earlier, it has to be perfect and you have to do it like, you know, like you said, write slowly and it has to be absolutely bang on. I mean, I guess it doesn't, because you don't have to release it, you don't have to show anyone, but the reps, the repetition and the practice is only going to make you better.
Yeah,
It's what I took from what you said.
No, absolutely. I think you have to be critical enough on yourself to be pushing yourself to make something as good as you can, but you also have to give yourself enough grace and let yourself make something, even if it doesn't turn out to be perfect. Like it's so rare that you'll write something that on the first draft will be perfect. So don't like give up on it because you're like, oh, this is hard to like. It's also rare that you'll write something that'll be perfect ever, but like writing something that's partway there and finished is a lot better than writing something halfway and then giving up on it. So yeah, I think that there's like a weird balance of having to be very confident in yourself and being like, just be like, I can do it and really believe in yourself. I think that's like the most important thing. But then at the same time, be hard on yourself too. When you finish the film, think about how can this be better? What isn't working about this? And make the next one better. And then let go of that voice when you're making it and just try to make it and let yourself make the movie and let yourself make these mistakes and then learn from them and just try to make every, next script or next project better. And I think people will really notice. I genuinely believe that if people are making like really, really great work consistently enough, like people will notice. And with the various, like, if you're uploading stuff to YouTube or like I think people will eventually see it. And it's like, I was an actor. I met a much more successful actor, and then we went through this other path. So it's kind of tough to say, but at the same time, it's like, if when I had met Finn, I had told him like, oh, I've always wanted to make movies, but I've never done it because they haven't been. It's like, no, I made these movies that weren't perfect, but like, I made a bunch of films, and Finn saw those films and they really responded to them and was like, I want to make something with this guy. And I think that I was in the right place at the right time, but at the same time, I had stuff that I could show. And it's like, when you do get an opportunity, I think it's important to be as prepared as you kind of can. Yeah.
No, that's great. That's great advice, man. And I mean, for me, this is more for me, really, not so much for the audience. But because I'm always told that, because I struggle to get my scripts to people because they're like, well, they're unsolicited. You need an agent and all these things. I don't know if that was something that you bypassed because obviously you worked in the industry, you had the connections. Is that something that you put merit on and worth on, that you have to have a literature agent to get your script seen? Or
I mean, it's tough to say. I think that obviously there's a balance of like, yeah, people are going to be hesitant to read unsolicited scripts if you're just like pestering people and like, not saying that you're doing this, but I'm saying if one was like, I get people being like, why? I could, a million people want to send me their script, like I can't read all of them. So like for us, and for me at least, like I was working with my manager and agents as an actor that had connections that then would allow that to happen. But I mean, it's tough. It's truly tough to say, because I think just write, I don't know. I think if you write like an incredible movie and you're making really, really awesome stuff and you have this great story, people might be like, oh, okay. But when they read it, and if you have a cool, like, I don't know, shorter version of it or like pitch document or something that like excites people and sort of requires less of them, then maybe that would be helpful. Because yeah, it's tough to send somebody like 120-page script and like, read this please, and then people have other things to do. It's difficult, but being able to send something that is like, makes it sort of as easy as possible for them to get a sense of it, and then like, oh, if they connect to this little 5-page snippet, you can send the rest of it, and it's not as it doesn't feel like as big of an ask. But again, I just feel like so fortunate in the way that I did it. And even as an actor, like with helping friends with scripts, the fact that I have a network of actors, and sometimes you can like send an actor a script and then they can bring it to their team, and like those channels can like they can kind of go through that way. But it's difficult. I think that just these connections
so
tough,
like
can be
hard to
yeah.
know, isn't it, really? And I totally get what you're saying there, that because like, even I get sent scripts from people and they're like, oh, can you read this? And if it's like 100, 110 pages long, you're like, even if it's really good, like that's a lot of time. And the chances are that there's so many scripts out there. I presume the further up the ladder you are as well, the more scripts you get sent. And it's like, it's time, and time is the most valuable thing. So it is a tricky thing convincing someone that, you know, it's worth their while. But that's a great point, that, you know, maybe a kind of 5-page, you know, treatment or something along those lines to kind of ease them in. And then if that sparks their interest, and then, oh, okay, yeah, I'll give that a read. And I think that's, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that probably would be. I'm just like advocating for yourself, but in a way where it's like just getting the sense of like if someone doesn't want to help you, they're probably not going to help you. But like if they do want to help you, then great, and like, you know, take people up on that in a way that's like respectful and cool. But like, yeah, I don't know. I've been sent a lot of scripts too that even I'm like, this is cool, but it's just there's nothing I can do with this movie. Like there's nothing I can really help you do. Like it's not. I've had friends or people who've sent me scripts. I'm like, this is great. I could maybe give you some of my thoughts on it, or not. Like you might not even want. Like I don't. There's not too much I can do with this where it's just like it's out of my. Even if it's very good, I'm like, there's just not a ton that I could do other than like maybe send it to somebody else. But that's kind of tricky too, and it's like, you know,
yeah. It's a fine line, isn't it? It can be quite awkward as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's a very personal thing when you spent, you know, God knows how many months, years, whatever it is on it. So you kind of have to tread carefully when you've got someone's, you know, hopes and dreams in your hand. It can be pretty awkward.
Now for a quick break. We'll be back to the episode shortly. If you enjoyed this episode and want to support us, get early access and exclusive content and episodes, click to join our YouTube channel and become a member now.
Please leave us a positive rating. Add us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok at Life in Film Pod. Essentially, please like and subscribe everything. It makes a huge difference. Thank you.
This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Do you work in the film industry? Are you freelance? Or perhaps you have a 9-to-5? No matter what you do, mental health affects us all. I struggled early on in my career with the uncertainty of if and when I would ever work again, struggling to pay my bills, or simply with anxiety. Don't know about you, but being an actor, it's very important for me to maintain structure in the downtimes, and I found not only exercise, but talking to someone, for me, was a game changer. And so Life in Film has partnered with BetterHelp to provide you with access to the largest online therapy service in the world. And it can all be done from the comfort of your own home, from a phone, tablet or laptop. No commute, cutting down travel costs, and most importantly, it's affordable. With over 1,000 therapists in the UK, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a wide variety of expertise in mental health. If you need someone to talk to and you're thinking of giving therapy a go, BetterHelp is a great option. And being a listener of the podcast, you get 10% off. That's 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lifeinfilm. That's betterhelp.com/lifeinfilm.
And back to the show.
The line's been cut. Oh, I've always wanted to say that.
We're gonna die. We're all gonna die.
Yeah, I co-wrote it and co-directed it and acted in it with my friend Finn. And we met, funny enough, we met on the street randomly, and I just was a fan of his work, and I was in film school at the time, and we just talked for a little bit about comedy movies that influenced both of us, because I'd seen him posting about certain movies that I really loved, like on his Instagram. So we just talked about movies for a little bit. And then I started acting. I got a job on Ghostbusters, Afterlife, like the first of this like new generation of Ghostbusters movies. I played a little part in that. Finn and I met. He like watched a bunch of my short films from high school and college and just really liked them, and then was like, I want to make films as well. Like, do you have anything that you've written? And I had recently written this slasher comedy short film that had a sort of a similar tone to Hell of a Summer, I'd say. Maybe a little bit zanier. And we read that together and really liked it. And then sort of just decided it would be cool to try and write a film together. Started trying to write a drama. Immediately realized we should probably just write a comedy because that's what we're both most interested in doing, just trying to make each other laugh. And then, we wrote it. The first draft was super quick. We wrote it in like 3 or 4 weeks. I would say probably 3 weeks, which is just unheard of for me. I'm a very slow writer. And then spent the next like 3 years really slowly coming through it and rewriting it until we were ready to go. So, a lot of that was sort of
That's crazy. Hang on, wait, so you met on the street?
Yeah, I was in Toronto and he was there. I think he was like doing a show with his band at the time. But I knew that he really liked these comedians called Jake and Amir, who I grew up loving, and whose comedy really sort of influenced Hell of a Summer. And then he had posted a lot about just other movies I loved. So I had a feeling, I was like, I feel like I'd get along well with this kid just because we sort of seemed to like a lot of the same things. And then I was right. And then we met again like on set and really we just became very fast friends. It was a sort of like a whirlwind experience of us just being like, oh, we love the same movies. We both want to make movies. We both want to write. We both want to direct. Like maybe let's write and direct something together.
Wow, that's crazy. There's so many like chance moments, like the fact you met him in the street, but then also you getting cast in Ghostbusters. It's like that is almost it's meant to be. What an amazing! That's amazing, man.
It's a bizarre story.
Yeah, and the fact that you, as you say, you write slowly, but writing it together was quicker. You obviously have a real connection there where you can work together as a team. And because, some people can be great writers individually. When they get together, it doesn't work for whatever reason, but you're obviously very compatible in that way.
Yeah, it was a very, we work in very different ways, but I think it was in a way that complemented each other, where Finn is such a, prolific artist in the sense that he's obviously a very well-known actor, but he writes and he writes music, and he's just he's really creative and working all the time. He's sort of one of those guys who's really just from one thing to the next and works very, very quickly. And then I sort of was the opposite, where I just was I would write these short films. I would write these films and I just would write so slowly. I was such a perfectionist in that way. And then I think, not to speak for Finn, but sometimes he'd abandon projects because he was writing them too quickly, and he was actually I sort of have lost interest and on to the next thing. And I would abandon them because I was writing them too slowly, and I was so then when we started writing together, there was that perfect balance of it was just way easier to write quickly, trying to make each other laugh, trying to write something just for each other and not being in your own head all the time. And then I could go off and really ruminate on something and just sit with an idea for at times weeks, months, and then come back and be I wrote this, how do you feel? And then he reads it and he gives me his feedback, and we're talking about how to make things work. But for me, the best part was the whole time I really felt like we had the same end goal in mind throughout all of production and through the writing as well. Where it really hardly felt like we disagreed about something. When an idea came up, we were both yes, that works, that's the solution we needed. And I think we kind of had the same or a very similar movie in our minds, and it really helped us bring it to life.
It's very, I really enjoyed it. It's my kind of movie, and I'm a big fan of Friday the 13th movies, and this is a proper send off of that, and really reminiscent of those movies, obviously with the added comedy. But yeah, it's just a lot of fun, and it really zips along. It's got it doesn't, sometimes when you mix comedy with horror, it can be strained in a way, but this just felt really natural, and you have such a fantastic cast as well. It just all came together really nicely. Were you, first time on set as a director, of a feature, what was that like going from, obviously you've got experience as an actor, you've obviously done these short films in the past, but what was it like to go and suddenly be co-directing a feature film? No,
it was a completely different animal from my short films that I was shooting in college or in high school with 6 of my friends, to all of a sudden we're on a big crew. And as an actor, you're so pampered as an actor, which is nice when you're an actor, because you get driven to set, you hang out in your trailer until it's ready for somebody to give you the clothes to put on and to do your hair and make sure you look good. And it's the whole kind of process you're just sort of ushered through because there's so much stress going on a set. So even as an actor being on set, it doesn't necessarily prepare you for the realities of what everybody else is going through on set. So it was a crazy experience. I mean, the first day second scene we film is like a scene I'm acting in. So not only am I getting my bearings as an actor, but also as a filmmaker and as a director, and I'm working with this cast and this crew for the first time, and I'm acting in a scene, and then we don't have playback with audio, so I can't even watch back my own scene to see how it went. So it just was this very like, you had to have this sort of blind faith and just feeling like, oh, I think that went well, and then I'd watch back the tape silently and be like, all right, the camera, like, we're in focus, the camera is moving at the right times, and I try to like fill in the performance in my mind. But then also, yeah, that specific scene was good because Finn was off camera, so it was helpful. But a lot of the time, I mean, you saw the movie, we're basically in every scene together. There's very few scenes that we're not both in. So we didn't really have that, like, one person can be focusing on acting, one person can be focusing on directing. Like, we didn't have the luxury of that. We kind of were both just, like, in it the entire time.
Is it a strange one, directing and acting at the same time, where I guess you're giving notes, but then you're also in the scene as well? So it's that kind of, there must be a tricky kind of blurred line there.
Absolutely. I mean, it's tough with, like, it's the biggest faux pas as an actor to, like, give a note to your scene partner. But as a director, that's your job. That's your only job, basically, at that moment when something. So it's like you're trying to act with somebody and be the best scene partner you can, but at the same time, like, you have to. Part of your mind has to be on, how is this feeling? Is this the right, like, is every beat that I want hit as a director being hit? And then trying to stop myself from, like, directing as an actor, where I play like a moron. I'm probably the biggest idiot in the movie, but at times, like, as a director, my director mind would kick in to be like, oh, this scene needs to go in this place. And then my instinct would be like, we need to start moving faster. I almost start moving faster to, like, set the example in character. But then I'm like, oh, my character actually wouldn't be. So it's like you're constantly having to go back and forth of being like, you're in character, cut, and then you, like, jump out, and then you're talking to everybody, and then you jump back in, and then let yourself sort of be spontaneous and act, because, you know, that for me, it's like much easier to act when things do feel spontaneous and like you're figuring it out as you go. But that's not really how I like to be directing. Like, when something amazing happens that you're not expecting, it's awesome, and I want to be able to roll with it. But at the same time, it's like you kind of have to keep the train moving and, like, making sure everything's working in the way that it needs to for the story.
Is it difficult when you're doing a scene and maybe something spontaneous does happen and it's great, and you're thinking, as a director, you're thinking, that was great, but I've still got to be in the scene because I've got my line kind of order. Do you allow yourself to flip between the two, or do you, when you're in the scene, you're kind of not thinking about the directing so much?
I mean, yeah, I try not to think about the directing as much as I can, but it does have, somebody will say something really funny or in a way that I wasn't expecting. And then I'm trying not to break as an actor, but also as a director. Like, if somebody does something really funny in a way that I just wasn't anticipating, it's like, yeah, you have to be like, all right, I got to go back to being the character. So there was little bits of that where I would catch myself sometimes being like, oh, that's really cool, or like, oh, this is interesting. I actually got really good advice from a friend of mine, Matt Johnson, who's a filmmaker, and he acts in a lot of his own films. And he was like, you got to cast yourself as the control freak. Like, you need to cast yourself as basically like the director of the movie within the movie. That way you can do both. You can be the guy who's, like, observing people or trying to control people, and it's not affecting your performance because it actually goes hand in hand. And he's like, your amateur move to cast yourself as, like, the wild card, like, idiot, and then having to be doing that at the same time as being the director. So that was
that's great advice.
interesting lesson. Yeah, it was a little late. We were, like, done shooting at that point, but you know, it was a great experience and great learning experience.
Well, there's a couple of scenes. There was one I was thinking when I was watching it, because I was thinking about the fact that you both directed and you were both in it, and I was really enjoying it. And I was getting swept up in it, but there were still moments where I was, like, trying to watch and see if I could. Like, there's a moment where you're getting attacked. I don't want to give anything away for anyone that's not seen the film, but you're getting attacked, and, you know, in a good film, you're convinced by someone that's getting thrown around the room and stuff. But I was watching it going, he's really doing that. Like, genuinely couldn't. And I I was trying to see if there was a stuntman involved or whatever, but it looked like it was genuinely you getting thrown around the room. Was I fooled?
You were fooled a little bit.
Was that real?
You were fooled a little bit in a good way. I had an amazing stunt double named Jesse. He was a French-Canadian guy who looked a lot like me, but just sort of more athletic and French-Canadian. So the sequence, there's a part where I, again, not giving too much, like really get thrown and like break through a table. And we split that into two parts where the first time in the wide where it's like up high and then into the table initially, that's him. And like I did all the stunts I could leading up to that point, and then they wouldn't let me do that one. They're like, there's no way. But then there's a moment where I come crashing through on the other side, and that was a little less dangerous. So I ended up just like flinging myself into the air and then crashing through the table on the way down so you could like get my landing. So I still broke through the table a little bit, but I wasn't like picked up and slammed into it. I kind of was able to cheat it. Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
it looked really. I mean, obviously that's the whole point of a good film, but I genuinely was like, I can't figure that out. That looks like it was genuinely him doing it. So it was obviously a great way. The way you shot it was great.
Thank you. That was such a fun day. Weirdly, the thing that hurt the most was like, there's kind of some big stunts. There's like fire involved. There's like all this other stuff. But like the thing that hurt me the most, I thought would be the easiest, where my character just gets punched and like lands in front of the camera. But the floor was so hard, and I did it like 8 or 9 times, and like every time I was slamming my hands and body down onto, I was like, oh, this actually kills. Like this really sucks. But then meanwhile, it's like there's stuff that I'm like throwing and holding that's on fire, but they do that all so safely that it looks dangerous, but it's like, no, it's all so controlled. But then when it's like, oh, you need to fall on the floor into frame, there's no real way to fake that. Like you can't really make, I mean, maybe if they had like a soft floor or something, but we didn't. We had a very hard floor.
Did you have any elbow pads or any padding on at all?
No, because I had the t-shirt on and the thing, so I wasn't able to have any pads.
Oh man, yeah, there's not, because I'm an actor myself, and it's one of those things, especially when you, like when I started out, I was like, I want to do everything, and then you injure yourself along the way, like you did on this, and then you're like, actually no, someone else could do that.
They can handle it. Yeah. I'm like, absolutely.
I was looking at, not only this project, but you've got another one coming called Idle Hands. Mm-hmm. Is that a thing? Just IMDb, you never know. It can be all completely fabricated.
That's in development right now. It's I don't know if you've seen the original Idle Hands movie from.
Is it a remake of the original?
Yeah, I would say it's like a reimagining of the original / remake. That movie's such a cult classic and a movie that I have a lot of love for. So I would tend to say it's more of a reimagining than a remake, just because I'm like, there's so much, it's so charming the first time around, but it's a similar concept and it's sort of updated and probably I'd say more so in my voice and in Finn's voice, but there's not too much I can say about it right now. We have a draft that we're like really, really excited about, and we're just in development right now with the studio, so there's no concrete updates I can give, but it is.
That's cool though. So it's the two of you again.
It would be the two of us again. Yeah, we had talked about making the film after, like, Finn and I got along very, very well. He's still my best friend, and like we somehow did not like fight at all throughout the process of making the movie. But I think both of us, growing up and we had thought we would be making films on our own, so this felt like a fun thing to do together. But when we finished Hell of a Summer, we were like, all right, cool. Like, Finn was like, I'm going to focus on some acting stuff. Like, you should go off and like make a movie on your own. I was like, yeah, great. And like, you as well. And we'd be very involved and like helpful. But then immediately they were like, do you guys want to write an Idle Hands movie? And we were like, we do want to write. So like we kind of immediately went back, and that would be a really special project for us to do together as well, because it's sort of it's like weirdly a very personal movie for a movie that's about a sort of possessed hand.
That's cool, man. I get what when you say a reimagining, because the original, I don't know, like in America maybe it's a much bigger film, but here Idle Hands is kind of a bit of a cult classic that not many people have seen, but it's like a hidden gem that people either love or they haven't seen it.
Exactly.
So I love that you're gonna kind of update it and play on the same sort of strengths as the original, but do something slightly new as well. That sounds cool. I'll look out for that one for sure.
Most embarrassing moments, yeah.
I definitely have embarrassing, both. I'm just trying to think of what I could omit from the story. Because like some of them are embarrassing for me, and then some of them are sort of embarrassing for other people, and I don't want to like put other people on blast too much. One time I like got in a car with it, or like rather an actor got into a car with me and they didn't know I was in the car, and then they started like just speaking to other people about like very personal stuff that they didn't recognize that I was there. And then I was like, do they know that I'm here? And this is like kind of like a awesome power move that they're like really like hitting me with this kind of like TMI stuff. And then it turns out they didn't know I was there. And they're like, oh, you were in the back of the car. I was like, I have my headphones on. What's up? Like, just tried to like play it off. But they were a cool, nice person, and so it wasn't so bad. But I mean, yeah, definitely. There's been stuff where I was supposed to play a weed dealer in a TV show. It was like the first thing I ever booked. And then I got there on the day of shooting, and the director was like, oh, well, weed's about to be legal, so like a weed dealer, I don't even know if that's really a thing anymore. And I was like, okay, interesting. He's like, well, what if you were just dealing like, and I don't remember what it ended up being like a really hard drug. Like it ended up being like meth or something. And I just was like, that is a big step up from weed. And I was like not prepared at all for that. I was like going and being like, yeah, I'm a young guy, but like I've met weed dealers. I've had acquaintances who have dealt weed. Like there's like a lot. And then I was like, I had never met anybody who dealt meth before. And I don't really like, it's a different vibe. I'm like, all right, so I had to pivot to try to like do it that way. But I mean, it ended up being fine, and it was a funny experience. But I just remember being so terrified on my first day.
There's nothing worse than coming onto a set and then realizing that either the whole thing has changed and all the lines are completely different, or the part has changed, or like preparations. I'm really like, I like to be completely prepared, and then I can be free. But if something changes like that at the last minute, you're just like, oh my god. Well, Billy, thanks so much for coming on, and I really enjoyed the film, and I'm really excited to see what you do next. I thought this was great, man.
Thank you so much, man. Thanks for having me.
It's all good. Real pleasure, and all the best with the film. When does it come out? Do you know if it comes out in the UK soon?
So it is going to come out in the UK. I don't know the exact date, but we come out in America on April 4th. And then it's going to be internationally, we're going to come out a little bit later, but I don't have the exact date yet.
Yeah, all the best with it, man.
I appreciate that, man.
I'm sure it's going to do great. It's an easy sell for sure.
Thank you. All right, man. Take care, man. Best of luck with everything. Thanks.
Cheers, man. Take care.
If you enjoyed this episode and want to support us, get early access and exclusive content and episodes, click to join our YouTube channel and become a member now. Thank you to our guest Billy, and thank you to his team at Wolf Kessler PR. As always, thank you to our sponsor, BetterHelp.